Hello everyone. Before today's episode, I would like to take this opportunity to tell you about PowerHourPod.com. With the NFL season around the corner, NFL DFS is back. NFL DFS is a different way of playing fantasy football. As a subscriber of PHP last year, I cannot be more happy about my growth as a DFS player. Last year, we have premium content such as articles, podcasts, and a Slack channel to help us break down each and every single slate that's offered on DraftKings and FanDuel. This year, PHP is dedicated to become even better with added tools. We have tools such as the wide receiver cornerback matchups, where you can quickly break down where your wide receiver would line up, where the cornerback would line up, and exploit the matchups that are available from week to week. We also have an injury tool which will let us know if a player is in and out of the lineup, how it would affect the team as a whole, and how it will affect your preparations in lineup building constructions. If you are interested in subscribing, use my promo code FFDynasty101 to get $10 off your subscription. Once you're subscribed and become part of the family, there are tons more discounts being given to you for other sports as well as postseason NFL. Don't miss this opportunity now. Join the team and become a better DFS player. And welcome to a new episode of Dynasty Mind. My name is Chris Chung, FF Dynasty 101. Tonight I am joined by Andrew Kozak from Dynasty 101 HQ. Drew, how are you doing?
I'm great. Very excited to be on here and finally getting to do a face-to-face with you after knowing you for what has it been, like 9 years now?
9 years, yes. You and I don't know what period of that is in your life when we first met, but that was my first Dynasty experience. We were in the same league, and then you were like, let's get out of here, let's start our own. We'll take their format, which is wonderful because it's been 9 years. We're still using the same format.
I can't get over it, and like just the success we've had with like finding owners and like the group we've built there is very cool. You know, some of the other guys have gone on to do some really cool stuff. You're doing a lot of fantasy stuff. It's been really fun to watch you like grow and become like an actual like member of this community with a real voice and a passion for it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Oh well, thank you for the kind words. I'm hoping to just let others know that there are others out there that really have a voice, really have an understanding of Dynasty, and what you and Devin are doing at D101 HQ is sort of follow the same mission, same vision that had in mind to help people start building a process. It's not just about player evaluation, it's not just about picking the right player in a draft, but you guys are actually teaching them to look into drafts, look into league, look into scoring and all that. It's fun. And wow, 9 years. We truly have a dynasty team because none of my leagues have lasted that long. And we have made some changes, but we kept the core owners, and we're excited to bring in each year, bringing strong owners, and we're hoping to keep that going. Drew, what has been your experience in terms of dynasty? How did you get started, and how did you jump from just a regular guy playing fantasy football to one that wants to be kept up with fantasy football news 24/7, 365 days a year?
Well, it was more like I've always been a football fan. Growing up 12, 13, 14 years old, I was a huge Denver Broncos fan back when I fell in love with them back when they won the Super Bowl in 97, 98 with Elway. And like my love for the sport just kind of grew. I've always been a numbers guy, so that kind of drew me to fantasy football. My dad got me into it real early too. You know, I was 13, 14 years old doing leagues with him and all his buddies. So that was real fun. But I don't know. It got to the point where I was like, all right, redraft is just, it got boring. I don't know. I needed more. And that kind of drew me to Dynasty and IDP as well. I love IDP leagues. So, I've been doing it for, I think about 12 or 13 years now.
Okay. So about 3 more, you have a 3 more years head start than I did. But our first league was everything and anything just thrown in together. It was not, we didn't start with like, oh, let's try a 12 team with you get to keep your own players. No, we had salary cap. We had IDP. What else was
2 QBs?
Oh, 2 QBs. That's right.
Man.
We were 2 QBs
50-man rosters.
I know. We didn't even dabble in Superflex. We went straight to 2 QBs.
Yeah.
Was it
And it's a
16?
16-team
It's
league.
a
Yeah,
16 team league.
16 right from the start.
Yeah, we had to scramble for quarterbacks when one gets injured. And things have changed, and we enjoy the changes that we've seen happen, but it's still a challenge. Our first year in that league, you and I were in the Super Bowl, and of
It
course
was
I
real cool.
lost. Even though one of your players, was it Arian Foster or somebody had a zero, and I still lost
Foster.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how that's stuck
Foster
in my
didn't
memory.
play. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that league was just a learning experience, and I feel like that was like a real launching point for us, like to get in. Really drew us into all these specific leagues and like fun scoring formats and stuff that we're so involved with now.
Absolutely. And I continually to draw on the experience. I continue to use that league, our league, as a starting point and building my process before I apply it to other dynasty leagues. I don't know about you.
Yeah, definitely. We've just learned so much, and with all the guys that there's been like 6 or 7 of us that have lasted all those 8 years. So it's just been crazy to watch the league develop and everybody get a lot smarter. And the drafts just got so much tougher. Obviously, not actually competing with you guys in it right now, but I'm definitely going to be the next guy up when somebody quits.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to have you back. Your team is in good hands. I mean, we'll get there at some point, and we'll talk about it offline. But let's talk about how we are entering 2018 Dynasty season. We've been through the whole off season. We've been waiting. We've been through drafts. We've been through countless discussions of who's going to fit where, how teams are. But now we are a month away to see the fruits of our labor, so to speak. We are finally going to see how effective our preparations are and how we're going to just survive the next 3 months. We've waited 6 months or 9 months, and now we just have 3 months of football. Coming into this year, Drew, what has been one thing that stood out to you that is unique about this past off season compared to your past experience in Dynasty?
I think the craziest thing about 2018 is just the rookie running back class. Like, I don't ever remember a year where, up to 8 running backs go before any other wide receiver, any quarterback, any other player. Like, rookie drafts are literally starting 1 through 8, going straight running back. So I think it's been real wild to experience that, and I'm really interested, looking forward to see what's going to happen with those players, and how they develop, because it's just so uncanny that this has happened, and the evaluations of these 8 running backs are just so all over the outside of Saquon, obviously. The evaluations for them are just all over the place. So it's going to be real fun finding out who was right, who was wrong, where we were right, what errors we made in our evaluation processes when we were looking at these guys. I actually broke down the running backs this year. This is my first year like really diving into tape and spending hours upon hours watching running backs carry the ball, look at their footwork and things like that. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see how poorly I actually did in my evaluations. So.
We all are going to have our misses, but our job is to hopefully get more hits than misses. But you're right. This year, the running back class has been talked about since 2017 offseason. People are telling us, save up your draft picks. This rookie class is coming. Despite the devaluation of running backs in the last 10 years, I think this class has been really fun in terms of watching their film, watching how they do in college, and knowing that there's a very small learning curve between college to the NFL. Now, things have changed since the draft, and large part of it is due to injuries. And unfortunately, a guy that I had in my 102, and it's still someone that I held on to on my 102, even though people like others before him, because he fell in the draft. Now, I'm going to jump into the second topic then, talking about Darius Geis here. He suffered an ACL after his first run. Unfortunate. This is devastating because he is one of my favorite running back to watch as a pure hard-nosed runner. So what is your sense then? How are you reacting to this news, and what is your advice then for our viewers concerning Darius Geis?
Yeah, I actually just saw a tweet. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, where it lists the Geis injury, the a couple of the other minor injuries, some of the other rookies that are starting, rookie running backs that are starting slow right now. And my response to it well, the question was, what does all of this news do to your rookie rankings at this point? And my response was, it does absolutely nothing to them. And if it does do anything, I think you're doing something wrong with your process. We spent I probably 2 weeks before training camp started, 2 weeks before preseason started, just preaching. All you saw on Twitter was, don't overreact, don't overreact, don't overreact. And then we get to this point and everybody just loses their mind because, Rashad Penny didn't look great in the first game, and Darius Geis gets hurt. But if you're drafting these rookie running backs, you shouldn't be drafting them with the intention of using them as like main fixtures in your fantasy team, at least the first year. Like, these are guys that you're drafting for the future. So I don't think that the Geis injury is a little bit bigger, so I can see maybe dropping him down a couple slots, maybe below Penny or below Chubb, if you had those guys like neck and neck. I think that Geis is much more talented, showed a lot more in college than either of those guys, so I still have him at my 102. But I think we're seeing people overreact way too much to what has happened, and it's really creating a situation where you can really take advantage at this point.
Absolutely. I tend to agree with that. I've seen a lot of people being able to steadfast and talents will win out, talent over everything in June or maybe May. Mm-hmm. But come August, when we first see a preseason game, when we first get these coach speak news, people begin to make dramatic adjustment to their expectations, and then they make an overcorrection on something that should not have been reacted to at all. You do react to news, you just don't want them to overreact. Noting that people are still going to overreact, how do you take advantage of this? How are you, if you're not a Geis owner, what are you hoping to acquire him now, or are you waiting until closer to the end of the season to try it again?
I mean, I would definitely approach the owner now. See what his asking price is. Find out if you can get him for a price that you're going to be happy and comfortable with. If he kind of balks at it, a lot of the Geis owners drafted him at the 102 slot, and they're really going to be interested in holding on to him. So maybe at that point, if there's someone who is like that, then you wait until the end of the season, or maybe to a point where they need something, and then you approach them then and say, hey, I can give you this, along with 2019 first, and maybe pull him in that way.
All right. So you're a buyer.
Yeah, definitely, okay. Big buyer. I think on the other side of it, though, looking at it as a Geis owner, it's a tough situation to be in. If I guess maybe I'm speaking too soon. Thinking about it real quickly here, if you're drafting Geis at 102, your team's either going to be really bad, because you drafted at the 102 slot, or you traded up, and chances are, if you traded up, then you wanted him anyway, so there's no reason in getting rid of him. So I don't think it really does much for you as an owner, but as someone who, if you're not owning him, I would definitely go and check that out and see if you can get him for a good deal.
Awesome, and that's something that I plan to do as well. And you're right, it may be at 102, you earned a 102, your team was bad, but it would be really tough to say that just because of Geis you can't turn your season around, or that right. You're solely relying on him, or any rookie for that matter. You can remove the name Geis, use someone that you pick at the 102 for them to turn your team around. That's asking a lot from a rookie. We know that from our past experience, draft is pretty much unpredictable of how players will turn out. But we are very solid on the talent that is Darius Geis, and we are excited for him to come back in 2019. Now, Geis is a special case. He's already ruled out for the rest of the season. You brought up a couple of running backs that we are really in this uncertainty right now. We're talking about Sony Michel, who was at one point talked about as the 102. We're talking about Rashad Penny, who is talked about as a 102, sometimes even still being talked about as a 102. they haven't been able to show us much yet, and people are reacting to it. What do you, in your past experience, would you like to take advantage of situations like this?
It's hard because sometimes you approach these owners and you buy into, oh, I can get Rashad Penny for kind of cheap because he hasn't looked so great, but they're on the flip side of that, you'll buy into him because he hasn't looked so great, and then he turns out to actually not be a good running back, and you end up wasting all that. So I do think that there is situations where you can approach those owners and find out what they want, and it can be at a level where you're comfortable with paying that price, but there's it's also situations where you don't want to go and overpay for these guys that already haven't looked good. I know we were just saying, dismiss all this news, but like you said, there is some value to preseason games and watching these guys. So you've got to take that into consideration when you're going to buy them. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want to pay equal value to 102 or 103 for Sony Michel at this point, because he came into the league with injury concerns already, and he didn't even make it to preseason before he was hurt. So he's already speaking true to that moniker, and it's something to definitely be wary of.
Absolutely. And is that the internal dialogue that you have with yourself, noting that you see, what should I pay for him? Should I still consider him at the value where he was drafted at, or should I really take into account that he's already hurt, and that's been his reputation of being hurt, and then you adjust your the price that you want to pay? Also, would you pay the full price? Yeah. Go ahead.
I with Sony Michel, I definitely would not. He scares me for sure. He has injury history going all the way back to high school, and it just hasn't stopped. I think it was his junior year he was out for part of the year, and that's when Chubb just went nuts.
Yeah.
There with him. I don't know. He's proving himself to be injury prone by walking in here, and I'm not buying him at this point. Unless I'm getting a decent discount, maybe if I feel like I'm paying value around like the 106, 107 range, I might go for it. But even then, it's still iffy. Mm-hmm. He actually is my RB6 this year, though, too. So,
okay. That was before the injury. Yeah, that was before the injury. He was already your RB6. That's fair.
Yeah.
So wrapping up on this strong, we came in talking about praising this running back class, but now we're talking about the concerns that are being brought up to the forefront with Penny, who I'm not really worried about the current injury news about him yet, but we're also he's not getting the full workload as he was projected, or he was talked up to have when he was drafted. And we're also seeing that now with Ronald Jones, who is not expected to be the starter. He has to earn that job, being told that Peyton Barber it will be the starter. How are you, what kind of internal dialogue do you have with yourself in creating the trade for these players if you do want to acquire them? What do you think the mindset is of the owners, and how would you take advantage of that?
It's tough. When you're approaching these guys who just, they just drafted these rookies 3 months ago or 2 months ago, maybe even a couple weeks ago with some of these drafts. And they drafted him with the intention that they like this guy and they're buying into his hype and everything like that. So when you go to buy them, you obviously have to go in there with the mindset that you're trying to pull a player away from them that they like and they're interested in, and they're invested in their future already. So you can't go in with a soft offer or anything along those lines, hey, I see this guy struggling, what do you want for him, sort of thing, because you're just going to get blown off. Mm-hmm. Maybe you approach him as more of a hey, I know you drafted this guy early. I liked him in that spot as well. I see that he's struggling right now. Is there a way we could work out a deal for him, sort of thing? Kind of approach it softly, because if you're too aggressive, you're just going to completely turn the owner off, and he's going to balk at any offer you give him.
Okay, so it's the way you frame it and approaching the owner, and I think you're right. It's one of the things that I don't see people think about when they when they hear that a player is struggling or a player has a nagging injury and they are thinking about this discount, they are trying their best to lowball offer, and that is the wrong approach. Owners who drafted a player has put in a strong investment in them in their first round rookies, and they're not going to give you a discount. They absolutely won't sell it to you at break even price. Maybe some will, but in my experience, nobody has ever said, "Okay, I'll sell you to you the same value that I took him during the draft." So there are some negotiation that needs to happen, but at the least, if your starting point is that our value of this players, our view of this players are on the same wavelengths right now, what little more can I do to push you over to accept the deal, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely right there with you. Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about doing this, or to go about getting these players. Getting any player that somebody's high on is to realize that they're not just gonna take any offer for them, and you've got to approach them where you guys are on the same level, and that kind of goes with anything, any trade offer really. You can't go and treat any owner like he's dumb or doesn't know what he's doing, because it's just going to turn him off, and it's going to cost you more in the long run.
Absolutely. So that's important to pay attention to, everyone. And these are things that you can apply not just to the players this year. Every single year, these patterns, these situations will happen. And speaking of repeating situations, every year we come into the NFL preseason, invariably and unfortunately, someone will get hurt on your team. Someone will be flat out a bust on your team, and we're talking both rookies and veterans. Now, you had high hopes for your team. They were insulated during the offseason, June, July, maybe some OTA news you hear from them. But come August, your player is not performing up to your standard for your team to compete. Your player is suffering a season-ending injury. What is your typical reaction in these last few weeks to help your team? Do you go in full, still trying to compete? What are some of the steps that you're taking in order to minimize the so-called damages to your team at this point?
Sure. I think a lot of what you have to do is take a step back and really think about what this does to your team as a whole. If you have Darius Geis as your RB2, we'll use him. Better example. Last year I had Allen Robinson on a number of teams, and he went down very early. And you have to think about what kind of changes that does to your team, and then whether or not you still think you can compete, number one. And if you don't think you can compete, is it something that you can resolve via trade? And if not, then I start selling off all my win now pieces. That right then and there. I don't like to be somebody who's just sitting there waiting to find out what's going to happen with my team. That's how you end up at 7-9, 8-8, whatever. 500 record. I know it's not actually 8.
The Jeff Fisher number.
Right.
We don't want to be Jeff Fisher. Nobody wants to be Jeff Fisher, even in fantasy football.
Especially not in fantasy football. That's the worst place to be. You want to either be at the bottom where you're getting those high draft picks, so you can get the Saquon Barkleys and the guys that are going to help propel your team to the next level, or you want to be competing. If you don't think you can make the playoffs, then sell your pieces, because getting into the playoffs is such a key thing. And if you do think you can get into the playoffs, conversely, don't go and sell everything just because of one A-Rob injury. I had a couple of leagues where I was able to either ship A-Rob off, sell him off for maybe 3/4 of his value, and it was enough to keep my team going and competing. And then once you get into the playoffs, then anything can happen. Or you look at selling future draft picks or some of those prospects, maybe a Darius Geis who's been injured, to do some patchwork on your team and get it back up to the championship level that you think it was at.
Excellent. I think that's very sound advice, and that's a sound process. So for you, from your experience then, at what point do you, or let me start, I have two-part question. First is, you have to make an honest assessment of your team. That's the one thing that you've just let us know, having that honest assessment. What gets in the way, do you think, from having that honest assessment about where your team is at after those injuries, suspensions, bust happens?
I mean, number one is probably hope. Honestly, if you're going into the season and you're real hopeful that you've got a good team and you're confident in it, then that's certainly something that's going to feel like it got in the way or gets in the way of you selling all your pieces off. Another thing that I could see getting in the way, let me think about it. I don't know. What about you, Chris? You've got me answering all these questions. You're a smart guy. What do you do in this situation?
I typically want to learn from the best Dynasty minds how their experience in the past with these situations are. I think one thing that definitely gets in my way of having that honest assessment is feeling the anxiety, feeling the anxiousness of I need to scramble and make something happen. And there's a few times where I just sat down and think about it, but every move that I make is framed by this anxiety, framed by, oh, I have to get moving or otherwise my team's going to fall behind. And then I just sell off pieces that I shouldn't have sold off. Or I have that anxiety about my team that I've only need to get over this hump. I need to wait for them to come back from their suspension and I'll be good again. But that typically doesn't work out. My waiver wires are not performing. They may have that one great week, then after I pick them up, they just disappear. Rashard Higgins, I'm looking at you. And it just it becomes a seesaw battle because now you're loaded with these players that you know that their ceiling isn't high, but you had that anxiety frame your approach, frame the way that you want things to happen, and it's just not happening. And then your team may not be too bad at this point because now you have players that may contribute some week, and you end up in the Jeff Fisher zone.
Which is exactly where we don't want to be. Yeah.
Right.
I think another great thing to do in situations like that is to go find somebody that you trust, that you respect as a fantasy owner. Get a second opinion, ask them what they think about your team, what kind of moves you could make to really get yourself in a better position, especially after injuries or where you need to take a step back and reevaluate or things like that. Getting second, third, fourth opinions is really a great tool. The league that we were speaking about before, GMB, it happens all the time. That chat is just full of us breaking down each other's opinions and arguing with each other about this player or that. So it's really great to have that sort of like close community that you can rely on to ask questions to.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing that once you start talking about that, that's one of the things you and I did a lot in our DMs. We're asking, is this trade, does it make sense? Looking at my team, and we're challenging our biases that way. And through our talks, I come to be able to trust your assessment of it because you're not out to like destroy my team or hurt my team. And at the same time, you're asking me about opinions as well. And we are able to just build that trust. And that's one thing I think it's important. If you have a lot of dynasty leagues, make sure to have at least one where there's a chat where people are active, who are willing to learn, who are willing to discuss. We can debate, we can have friendly banters, we can have emotional banters, but at the end of the day, we know this is fantasy football. We're having fun with it.
Yep. Yeah. I can't imagine where I would be as a fantasy player without, like you said, without the league chat that you're speaking of. It's really made a huge difference, not only in my interest in fantasy football, but also in just growing and becoming a smarter player. So I agree. Getting a group of guys together that I think this even goes as far as saying, when you're commissioning a league or when you're joining a league, definitely take that into consideration. You don't want to be joining a league full of a bunch of Joes, just because you're not going to get any better that way. It's not going to do you any good. So I think challenging yourself and finding leagues like that is definitely key to becoming a better fantasy player.
Absolutely. And here's the quick tip for people who are new to Dynasty, who are finding Dynasty that has a chat. If people are talking about Des Bryant in February, if people are talking about the draft in March, April, June, you have an active league. You have a league that's going to be open to bouncing ideas, open to having discussions. Because I've been in leagues where they have a chat, people are buzzing all around, talking all a bunch of stuff during the football season, but once January hits, it's quiet. You
Yeah.
I those kind of leagues typically don't survive for me. I either move on or they fold.
Yeah, they end up folding pretty quickly. Definitely. Not just like the activity itself is just such a huge thing with fantasy leagues that you can't really get away with having a good league without it.
Absolutely. So, with that said, talking about things ending, we'll head into our last topic. We're talking about season-ending injuries that will happen. We already know there are a couple of notable names, not just Darius guys. Hunter Henry, whose season is lost, and
Such a bummer.
yeah, absolutely. I have him in a couple of my leagues, and I have no idea what to do. He's not on IR. I can't even put him on IR. He just has that O next to his name.
Just eating up a roster spot.
I know. I blame MFL for being that strict about the rules. But things will happen. We know this. We've played fantasy football long enough to know that nobody is safe. Nobody is immune to season-ending injuries. But through your experience in watching a player's value fluctuate during that time, what is typically your sense of how the value go up or down for, say, a stud player or for a promising player versus someone that you know that after a season-ending injury you can just forget about any sort of future value that they might have?
Their value changes like now time. This is when you want to buy them. Maybe in season also it's just going to keep decreasing, but then there's going to be a tilting point right around week 4, week 5 or so, where those teams are going to start making decisions on their team, like what we were talking about. They're going to give up on their season. They started 1-4. You can't buy this guy by cheap anymore because he's going to be back next year, and that's what they're looking at. So you want to look at competitors that have these kind of players. That's going to be a great place to buy them, or buy them early, like buy them now. If you're a team that already is looking at rebuilding for this year, you're not gonna win very many games. Go buy Hunter Henry. Go pick up Darius guys. Give what you have to give, because you're gonna be able to get them for 9/10 value or 3/4 value or some fraction of their actual value. And then by the time we're in January, February talking about these players again, they're gonna be back up to full value. Allen Robinson is a great example of this again. He got, even before he was signed with the Bears, once we started talking about him again as a potential free agent and everything, his value just went right back up to, maybe not exactly where it was, but close enough where it was to the point where you didn't want to go buy him anymore. So I think the big thing is to buy them at the right times and know what those times are. Looking at the other team's situation makes a huge difference as well. So all of those kind of factors.
Absolutely. I think that's a great advice that I haven't even thought of, because this is the window, and I'm glad to have you on tonight. This is the window when season-ending injuries, people are eternally hopeful that their teams can still compete, so you offer them competitive pieces. You don't offer them low balls. You don't offer them soft proposals. You make that move. Don't be over aggressive like you mentioned, but you make that move that will look like a benefit for both of you. And that's where you want to buy Hunter Henry. That's where you want to buy Darius guys. Hopefully we don't see any more major injuries during this preseason, but we have no idea what's going to happen in season. David Johnson is an example. 1 week gone.
Oh man, that was brutal.
That was brutal. I had him on my team, but good enough. I was able to bounce back because I made the moves right on time and not be hopeful and stashing him on my roster for the whole season. That would have been a roster clogger. But yes, thank you for just sharing those thoughts. I think that is a very good thing for people to think about. And guys, this information that Drew shared is not just for this year. You can apply it next year. You can apply it the year after that, because we know injuries will happen. We know busts will happen. We know suspension will be value killers, and you want to be ahead of the curve in that manner. So Drew, we have a glimpse of your Dynasty mind. We have a short window into understanding how your mind works with Dynasty. Let people know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and how they can learn more about helping themselves to become a better Dynasty owner.
You can find me at says right there D101 underscore Drewski. I do the main podcast for Dynasty101.com. You can find, I'm also, I guess, the editor in chief of the website now. So we've got a lot of people. We just had about, I think, 8 or 9 people sign up to start producing content for us. So it's not just me and Devin and one other guy now. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. You know, we've got IDP going on now. We've got 2QB coming up. So definitely come check us out. And then if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. Anytime, you know, you're stumped, you need a second opinion, anything like that, I'm almost always available. I work from home, so so it's a pretty good gig, and I'm always interested in talking fantasy football with people. So yeah, definitely reach out to me on Twitter, and I'll give you the best take I can.
Awesome. And soon enough, you'll be moving to the West Coast time, so people can still hit you up during the midnight in the Eastern Coast, midnight in the Central time. They can find you all the time. And I know you're very active. I watch. We interact on Twitter a lot, and you bring in good questions as well that gets people thinking. Thank you for joining me tonight, Drew, and I really wish you the best in your travels, and hopefully your team will win the championship this year.
Thanks. Yeah, you too, man. I'm glad to be on. Hopefully we do this again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, folks, and have a good night.